All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this morning and for removing personal information about you from results. My name is Hayley Tsukayama. I am Associate Director of Legislative Activism at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a member-supported digital civil rights nonprofit. That long title means I manage our state legislative portfolio, but I also work on our internal consumer privacy working group, and I'm your moderator today. So thank you for joining us, and I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, and good morning. Thank you all for coming so early and staying for 8. I'm Heidi Tandy. I'm a board certified intellectual property attorney from Florida, although I'm also a member of the Bar of New York. And I have been dealing with internet issues for, I guess I'm required to legally say 29 years because that's how long I've been a member of the bar, but it's really 30.
Hi everyone, I am Bill Budington. I'm a senior staff technologist at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I've been there for about 12 years. I focus on doing things like malware reversing and data Android development in this panel in the past, and advising lawyers on technical issues. Yeah, and thanks so much for making your way out at this early hour.
All right. Well, I think just to kick off and set the table a little bit, I mean, of course, I think it's probably fair to say we all know and use Google. But what kinds of personal information might be on there that you would like to remove, and how might having that information out there affect your daily life?
Yeah, it's interesting because even if you don't have a Google account and you're not logged into Google, then they're collecting information on you all the time, right? Through Google Pixel, through the apps you have installed, through your usage of your device. If you have an Android device, mostly you can't log into your Google Android phone if you have a Google Android phone without logging into Google services. And I'll get into the Android ecosystem in a bit, but what information they have on you depends on, if you're logged in, your search queries are loggable, although you can turn that off. Your YouTube history, or keep in mind that this is one of the largest ad companies in the world, right? Disproportionately accounting for trackers that are installed in all sorts of apps and in websites as third-party trackers, right? So browsers generally have gotten much better at protecting you, although there are exceptions. The biggest exception, obviously, being Google Chrome. And so many browsers, although Google Chrome, for instance, promised to disable third-party cookies in the browser, they then went around and did 180 on that promise. And so we are left with the state of affairs currently, where you have a broad range of browsers that roughly protect your privacy, a number of which notables, Firefox, including the disconnect block list, and we have Brave doing some of that out of the box, and that being a fork of the Chromium code base built by Google. And yeah, DuckDuckGo browser I heard, others kind of the privacy protective browsers out there. So those are kind of a few, and maybe we'll get into a little bit of like the what you can do a little bit later.
So one of the things that's important to keep in mind is that I think we're going to be focusing a lot on personal information and how to remove that from Google. But there is, of course, Google's interface with corporate entities, businesses, both service providers and goods providers. And sometimes, Google has made it very within a company's vested interest to have its information accessible via Google. And there have been times where, for example, Google has especially, for things like food reservations and delivered, restaurant reservations, deliveries, hotel reservations, they've become an intermediary when people are searching for the information. If you don't jump through certain hoops to make your site accessible to Google in certain ways, then they're going to serve as an intermediary and possibly prevent people from being able to reach out directly to you or reach out to you in your preferred method. So both figuring out a way to manifest so that Google is not doing that or not doing that in a problematic way, or at the very least you're aware of what they're doing, so you can use social media and non-Google managed systems like things controlled by Mark Zuckerberg instead, which are not Google controlled, to get information out to your potential customers about what your business is doing, to be able to be directly in contact with them without a Google intermediary.
All right, so we sort of set the table on what we're talking about today. Just in a practical sense, I think we all get this question a lot, like, what is the one thing I could do, or what is the most important thing I could do? So we'll start there and maybe dig in after that. But what is sort of your top tip for people who are worried about their privacy?
The best thing to do is, starting at age 3, have a completely separate persona that is your online internet persona, and keep it completely separate from your real persona. We are all a little too old for doing that, but that's really the only way to keep yourself completely outside the scope of the internet. So none of what I'm saying is legal advice. I have 3 kids. I have gone through fights over the last 15, 18 years with their various schools when they say things like, you shouldn't be using social media or putting your information on the internet, students, because people will be able to, find you and it's your permanent record and blah, blah, blah. But we're going to share all this information about the sports that you're playing and the awards that you're winning and the classes that you're taking, because we don't actually think that that's your personally identifying information. And yes, most schools now have a thing where, like, you have to sign, for your kids' photos to be shared on the internet, and supposedly they won't. But you can't prevent, like, the other parents from sharing those photos or anything like that. So there's really no way to be completely offline, especially with AI and photo recognition doing such a better job. So what is more important to do is to have control over the information that's being online. And that means being very strategic in what you're taking down. And it might mean having creating an LLC that's your first name, your middle name, your last name LLC, somewhere that is relatively inexpensive, like Nevada. And then utilizing that in connection with, whatever the next generation of WeWork is, or your friendly neighborhood UPS store, or a UPS store that is a 15-minute drive away from you in the standard direction that you normally drive in, and utilizing those as what you're using for your, public facing content and your public facing information. Because then, yes, you're online, you're findable, but you're not findable in something that's necessarily connected to your house. Also, if you buy a house or an apartment, absolutely do it in the name of an LLC that has no connection to you. Because all that is completely findable and public records.
So I covered a little bit of what you can do on a personal level in terms of your own browsing habits, in terms of protecting yourself. But what can we do as a society, right? I think the most outsized impact, that single thing that you could do, is contact a member of Congress and advocate for a federal privacy law. Federal privacy law is something that we do not have in the US. We have certain very circumscribed state laws. We have the California Consumer Privacy Act in California, the Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act, and these are very tightly scoped, both in location and what they protect, right? And so if we have a advocacy for a federal privacy law, and by federal privacy law, one that must necessarily set the floor and not the ceiling for states to do better, right? We want a federal privacy law that has private right of action, Private right of action means that you're not relying on a state prosecutor to go and sue the company that abused your privacy. You, as an individual, can sue the company that has violated your privacy. That's private right of action. So we need a federal privacy law that has private right of action and sets the floor and not the ceiling. So no preemption of better state laws so that states can enact laws that protect their citizens even better than the federal. Unfortunately, we have nothing right now. So legislators just need to do something. And that's something that you can advocate for, right? You can write your member of Congress. You can show that you are concerned about the state of affairs and that your information is out there, not protected. Like, EU citizens have the GDPR, they have e-privacy. These are things that protect the citizens of Europe and residents of Europe. But we have nothing like that across the board in the US. So that's something that you can do right now. Yeah.
Do you have reference for that parallel legislation if we do go and try and contact our representatives and say, hey, this is what other people did?
Yeah, I mean, I think the California Consumer Privacy Act is a good reference point. I think it has certainly provisions that I think that has a certain limited private right of action.
Case of security breach.
Yeah, and I think that those as reference points would help you make a point. But just generally, just registering, a lot of members of Congress will keep tallies of categorizations of what people are concerned about. And yes, they'll be reading comments. They'll be making sure that it's a unique thing and not just a campaign. So having your personal spin on the message does matter. But also just kind of making sure that you are writing them with your real concern and saying that this is about a federal privacy law that we want to see here.
So one of the things about the GDPR, which I personally hate, which I'm sure that a lot of people like, is that it doesn't differentiate between information that is being provided by an individual on behalf of a company and by an individual. And this is actually a big problem for smaller entities in the European community, because if you're getting somebody's, like someone who works at Google, you're getting their, name at google.com, to purchase, I don't know, pens or something like that to be sent from your company to theirs. All of their personally identifying information from name and et cetera, that's used in a business context is still considered personally identifying information. And it's possible for that individual to scramble the company information by asking for it to be removed, which makes it then difficult for business-to-business relationships to be created. I am really not a fan of this aspect of the GDPR. And if the US tried to replicate the GDPR, they'd probably if they did anything, they'd probably incorporate that, and it wouldn't be great. So the nuance of how the laws manifest is significant, especially because in a lot of European community situations, including all the things where they were concerned about national security in the US slurping in all information, which is why certain privacy things cannot be manifested from the EU to the US. A concern from that is that the goal in the European community is to strive for compliance. And if you're striving for compliance, then you cannot be stuck with a big fine. The US does not have the same striving for compliance concept. So it's the same way that we have, if you use somebody's photo on your website, you're going to get a letter from Hayley demanding a $250,000 copyright infringement penalty. And that's the same kind of thing that would manifest here in the US, because we don't have that kind of a concept as part of our law here.
No, you're good. All right, we've taken a very broad view. I do kind of want to pull it down a little bit. Are there different times when you might want to do different things to your accounts, or to look at information? Like Heidi, we talked about overseas travel. That might be a case. I'm kind of interested, And if you could, like, think about, like, what is a tip or a tool or an action that you encourage people to take? Like, I think we all probably give tech advice to our friends and family. So, like, what is one that you give to sort of your low tech people, your medium tech people, and your high tech people?
Yeah, I mean, one that I can think of is using different devices for different purposes, keeping your information segmented so that, say you have a work phone that you have to have something installed on because for work purposes, then keeping that phone, that device separate from your personal phone and making sure that those apps that you're forced to use are installed only on the work device and not using it for personal use and browsing. And so that's one thing. And then if you have a phone that you use to communicate, for instance, you have sensitive information on, then not installing your flashlight app that probably has a dozen and two trackers installed on it. Using instead the operating system level flashlight, which you already have installed, because every new app presents a new security and privacy window for either trackers and the access to privacy or hackers on the axis of security to find vulnerabilities.
So as Haley was mentioning, overseas travel is one of those times where you might want to go through and check your online profile, a week or two before you leave and see if there, or even a month or two, especially if you're going to a country that does, pay attention to what your social media profile might be. If you're trying to get, a worker visa or something like that in a different country, going through and scrubbing your profile to the extent that you can beforehand. Obviously, there are apps and there are processes that you can use on third-party sites like Twitter and which I will forever dead name, sorry. Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Threads. Where you can go through and it will automatically delete all of your old things. You can't really do that on Reddit. You have to go through manually and either take stuff down or edit it so that your name and the date might still be there, content isn't necessarily. You can also utilize DMCA takedown notices if there's content on a website that you created. In other words, I wrote this post. And you can go to the site through their DMCA takedown process and ask for it to be removed because you no longer want them to have the license to utilize your copyright protected work. I try to do this very, very minimally, like only once all of the other options have failed. But if it's something that is uneditable and you want to take it down, you certainly can go through and do that. You also have, that's also something, by the way, that can happen after somebody's passed, because the person who inherits their copyright rights is able to utilize those DMCA takedown things to remove some content, all content, et cetera, so that somebody's online profile is minimized once they pass and you have, fewer emails coming in, trying to remind you of such and such date anyway. But before you're traveling overseas, not just for going out of the country, but coming back into the country, checking to make sure that, the first 5 or 6 pages of Google, maybe even the first 10 pages of Google search of you is not showing anything that might impact your ability to come into the US, especially if you are not a US citizen and you're coming back into the US. This is definitely something to keep in mind. I mean, yes, we can say these days, but really honestly in general, because there are provisions under US law that have existed for, decades, that if you are considered you're espousing things that are contrary to US policy or laws, et cetera, then that can sometimes be grounds for revoking a visa, not letting you in, and making sure that that kind of thing isn't showing up on the first couple pages of Google is a good idea. I mean, generally we work on the presumption for customers that if it's not on the first page or two of Google. Nobody is going to go beyond that. With AI controlling how Google search results come out these days, you can't really be sure that what somebody is seeing is what you're seeing. So my strong recommend on this is that you do a search in Google just to see regular, and then you go into incognito mode and you see in incognito mode, which is depending on your device, it's usually in top right-hand corner, and you can click and switch into searching in incognito mode. Incognito mode does not mean Google is not keeping track of what your search results are or what your search queries are, but it's showing you something that is not where the search results are not dependent on all the searches that you conducted in the last 20 years. So it's a little bit more what somebody else would see. Go on to a public, computer at a hotel, in a hotel lobby or something like that, and see what's coming up in a search there, because then again, you're getting information that's not impacted by your own personal searches, and you'll have a better idea of what it is.
I know that they are imperfect, but in terms of tools that Google like puts in its own settings, or I say Google, I'm using it as shorthand for a lot of these tech companies, right? So it can be a generalizable thing, but what are settings that you think people really should be paying attention to? What are ways that they can, that can help them control their information from inside the house, as it were? And also, how much attention does Google have to pay to requests that we make about that kind of thing?
Location privacy, location privacy, location privacy. There's a historical location information that is stored about you. And Google was fined recently $400 million by 40 states in general because of the violations of location privacy they were found to have violated. So one of the ways in which you can kind of move, and I'll get into this in a bit, on your personal devices, even Android devices too. And this is again kind of a higher level of technical proficiency, is to install some other operating system and not Google's Android on your phone if possible. And there are a number of options out there, which I will cover in a moment, but I want to give Heidi a chance to respond.
So Google makes two things not impossible, relatively easy. And you can Google to find the URL for being able to ask Google to remove certain information about you from their search engines. And it's usually only PI, like real personally identifying information, your address, your phone number, sometimes to some extent your email address, and it will be removed from what shows up in that little box on the first page on the right of a Google search. So if you're finding that your personal phone number, for example, is up there, it will be removed. I have a personal phone number and I have a Google phone number. So I am actually fine for my Google phone number to be out there. My work phone number has to be out there because that is a requirement of both the Florida and the New York bar. My office address has to be out there because, again, that's a requirement of the bar. So there are certain licensed industries that if you're in, for example, if you're a doctor and you're practicing, your personally identifying information that relates to your work access information has to be available for current, and there's even a screen for people who've retired so that there can be a contact made. And I think that all of that makes sense. If you're doing something that's public facing and public supporting, then the people who you're working for need to be able to contact you and reach you, even if you change your contact information, your numbers. But if you aren't in that kind of situation and you have, for example, a license, cosmetology or something like that, then again, having an additional phone number, whether you get it from Google or whether you get it from a different, from your phone company, having a different phone number that you can put out there lets you keep your personal phone number private. And I mean, everybody screens their calls anyway, but there's different ways to do it. The other thing is if you are an EU citizen or resident, and the distinction for having residency in the European community is kind of flimsy sometimes in certain of the countries, and you can establish residency very easily. And once you've done that, you have the ability to utilize the take it down laws that exist under European privacy constructs. and have much more information removed. You have to be the one who finds the URLs. You have to be the one who finds all the specific information. But let's say, for example, there was a mistaken identity situation that happened 15 years ago, and it's still showing up in Google search results. That's the kind of thing that can come down under European Community take it down regulations. And even if you were arrested or accused of a crime, if you weren't convicted of it, you can again have it taken down. So if there's something that's really troubling out there and you're able to manifest European residency without, striving for citizenship, then that is something that can be done. But I don't think it's necessary for, ordinary situations, but if it's an extreme situation, like an absolutely false accusation that's years and years old, you can do it.
I would say that the number one way that you can remove your information from Google is to not give it to them in the first place, and not actively give it to them on a continual basis. One of the things that you could do is use another Maps app, for instance. There are a number of options out there. There's a number of offline options out there, so that GPS is a receive-only technology. It triangulates where you are based on the relative signal strength are from satellites. And so it does not require you to upload information in order to know where you are. So you can use apps like Organic Maps, Home Maps, and the like, and re-download an entire region, and you won't be continually giving your information out to Google when you navigate, for instance. Now, this comes with some caveats. Most notably, you won't have like traffic conditions when you are driving, but you will be, it does allow for navigation on various way, like means of navigation. You can, as I mentioned, install other operating systems on your Android phone, depending on if they are supported by your particular model of phone is supported by that operating system. There are a number of options out there, and these options emphasize different aspects, either privacy or security, one of which is Calyx OS, Calyx OS. And Calyx is a great option for specifically privacy, and they are a nonprofit which also offered a number of educational services. And they developed Calyx OS for you to install on your phone, and it comes without all the Google prompt that you would automatically have on an Android Google phone. In addition, there are security focused phones, or focused operating systems that you can install on an Android phone. One of which is called Graphene. Graphene OS is an inheritor from what used to be called Copperhead OS. I had Copperhead on my phone for a number of years, and the usability of it was hard. It was before the time when Organic Maps that I just mentioned was available, but I could navigate using Google Maps in the browser, even though I refused to install the native Google Maps app, because at least in the browser you have permissions controls, and won't be giving away your location just by opening the app. Have some dialogue that is available there, and you're not installing some closed source Maps app, for instance. Lineage OS is another option there, another kind of very widely supported option. The caveat here is that only some of these support secure boot mechanisms. That's kind of another security discussion. But there are options out there for removing Google from your Android phone, depending on whether you have a phone that's supported. Usually the flagship phones like Pixels are widely supported. But some of the smaller kind of more idiosyncratic phones, especially if they're not widely used in general, cheaper phones are not supported generally by these alternative OSs.
It's fun. All right, we're gonna move to QA in just a minute, so start thinking about questions that you want to ask our panel. I do want to ask you folks, any product we name is not an endorsement, I should say, but there are identity scrubbing services, for example, that are out there. Is that like an investment that's worth it for the average person?
There are certain situations where you may want to do that. But it's also possible, although slightly less easy these days, to manifest your own version of what has the same effect as scrubbing. As I said, the goal is in a lot of the scrubbing situation, not necessarily to remove everything, but to push it to like page 18 of Google search results. So you have so much chat that covers, maybe from pages 2 through 14. And you can create that yourself by going to the different blogging services, by, creating accounts on things like Reddit and basically every one of the services, to have an account there, and then put a little bit of nonsense chatter about it, like, oh, hey, the weather in Antarctica today is X, or here is a photo of a rock that was shared, by the US government 17 years ago, which has no copyright, and therefore I can share it without infringing on anybody's rights. And, dapple that account with random things, maybe things you're interested in, maybe things that you're not, that are non-infringing. Utilizing government photos, for example, is one way to do it. This day in history kinds of things. And once you've done that for, a couple weeks, you'll have something that the Google algorithms will start to find and notice and pull in. And that will really become your online profile for the first couple pages. And obviously, if you have a work situation or a licensing situation where that information does, is included on a state or a locality, then that is still going to be up there. There's no way to wipe that out. If you ask Google to wipe it, they may take it out, but it'll come back in again the next time that page is visited by the robots. The other thing to do is going into archive.org and seeing if there's older content about you that you want to highlight and bring out again, and then including that thing, this day in history blogs that are more personalized, that goes back to, oh, I said this back in 2004. Wasn't I silly? Or wasn't I right? And having all those kinds of things manifesting again, you can put the same content on multiple sites and multiple services. And once you've done that, you have something that's sort of in rotation. And it is time consuming, but it is also using your time rather than paying $1,000 to one of those companies is certainly a reasonable choice for somebody.
Yeah, so some of these data brokers there's different types of data brokers, and Google certainly is a type of data broker. They sell and deal with your information. No, they don't sell, but they munge your information in ways that maximize profit, right? And they're, part of the online ads ecosystem, a multi-billion-dollar industry that is widely driven by surveillance capitalism, right? And so your information is available by ad tech companies selling that information, then feeding into an ecosystem where, for instance, products like Locate X, and Locate X is a piece of technology that is delivered to law enforcement throughout the country, can collate your location information and even real-time location information based on your mobile advertiser ID being delivered to the ad ecosystem in a number of ways. The apps that you use, for instance, will have SDKs, software development kits, which are delivering your information up to advertisers or just data brokers in general. And they basically are included in apps with the promise of monetary remuneration. If you install this SDK in your app, then you'll get some monetary kickback. And the trade-off is your user's privacy. You uploading the location information, for instance, of users to the ecosystem or to data brokers would then, sell that information to tools like LocateX, which in an investigation earlier this year by 404 Media found that even if you're not a member of law enforcement, but promise to work with them at some point in the future, that they will have that information delivered to you via this tool, LocateX. So given that ecosystem, and the other way that it's delivered is through real-time bidding in like these micro bidding transactions where basically your information is delivered in a bid offer. Basically, Google, which is again the number one biggest advertising company in the world, will use the information that it knows about you by apps that have the Google's supply side advertising library included in the app, will collate that information and make it available to bidders that are trying to display an ad. And even if you are a bidder which loses the auction, you still have information on that user. There are entire data brokers which do not wish to win bids and are simply bidding to collect that information. So given this ecosystem, and there are other data broker types like those that collect publicly available information on you through like tax records, property records, etc. Some of those are people search, for instance, find me, been verified. These data brokers often have opt-outs that you can go and manually opt out remove your information from them. A staff member at Consumer Reports, Yael Grauer, collated a big ass data broker opt-out list, Bad Bool. And Bad Bool is basically a just huge list of data brokers where you can manually go through the process of, oh, okay, here's how you remove your information from them. And makes sure that you have a list that has the processes by which you're able to remove your data from them. Now, this is a laborious, very laborious process that takes time. But, again, there are opt-out services, the biggest being Delete Me. In a Consumer Reports finding, they found that Delete Me wasn't necessarily the most effective. The most effective they found were two services called Optory and Easy Opt-outs with different levels of service. So they're affordable for some, amount of in the dozens of dollars, removing your data. So there are some services that you can pay for to do this. You might want to ask if you're a public figure, or you think that there's some legitimate interest for your information not to be out there for the purpose of your job, you might want to ask your job to cover that cost as well. Yeah.
But on the flip side, if you are job hunting, there's really no way, unless, like, if you're using any of the services, whether it's LinkedIn or any of the other job hunting services, there's no way to keep your information private from being part of those ecosystems once you upload your resume to, any of the things that say that they are, recruiters or anything like that. Your information is out there in that situation. Being able to pull it down later is possible, but complicated.
All right, we're gonna move to Q&A, so please start lining up. I've been trying to write down some top takeaways though. So I do want to say, I think what I'm hearing from you all, and thank you for all that information, is sort of be sure to check what your online profile is. So look yourself up in incognito mode. Pay attention to those first couple pages. Specifically think about your online profile in those high risk situations. Check those people search sites. Limit your information, so starve them at the source, right? Keep your downloads low, wipe your location history, separate your phone numbers and emails and for different purposes when you possibly can. Use those auto delete tools, use opt-outs when you can. And then you can act by, exploring other operating systems, by using alternate apps, in cases where it makes sense, like setting up the LLC or having another entity that to interact with businesses and write Congress. So those are that's what I heard. All right, please go ahead.
Yes, can you talk about privacy and controls on iOS platform?
Yeah, so iOS is not an advertising company yet. They actually have a greater share in recent years of their business model being allocated to ads and online advertising. But they are by and large a product company. So the amount of tracking that goes on in iOS is lessened, especially to Google, but for obvious reasons. Well, it's certainly lessened. So there's a recent incident where Meta was tracking its users even when Meta was basically reaching out to another. So if you're using some private browsing mode, incognito mode, they would use a security loophole in the sandboxing of different apps to reach out to, if you have, for instance, Facebook installed on your phone, and would be able to kind of link your identity together by this security circumvention technique via localhost. So if you look up the news article for this to look up is just keywords Meta localhost mobile tracking. So that was found to be possible within Android phones, but it was not possible within Apple iOS phones because of the security hardening of the Apple's model of app sandboxing. So generally, the security model of Apple, I personally, I'm more confident in it. That's why I use a Android or a iOS phone. That being said, there are OS level controls that you can go into and audit where your information is going. You go into settings and privacy. You should be able to find some tools there, and it will display a list of endpoints of where your apps are communicating to. You might want to consider uninstalling those apps which are sending information to destinations that you don't know and seem nefarious.
So one of the other things about iPhones is that you can turn off like he said, on a granular level for each individual app, as whether you wanted to share your location service and things like that. But none of that controls when you're using either Chrome or the Safari browser on your iPhone. So if you, for example, have the Facebook app and you have location turned off for that, you need to also make sure that it's turned off when you're using Safari and Chrome if you ever log into Facebook using those elements. And frankly, even if you're not, because a different site might have a Facebook login option or something like that, and therefore there's some connection between that page in Facebook or that page in Google, and it's providing the information. So again, you can turn off your location services on everything, although you may want to be more judicious about that. Like, for example, in my family, Everybody, can turn off whatever they want for location services, except I've asked everybody to keep on find my iPhone phone, so we all vaguely know where each other are, but if something gets lost, you can find it.
Like,
We also often recommend people reset their ad identifier on the iPhones. That's another thing to consider.
There's a lot of good information here, and I feel like I need to sit down and kind of take it all in. Will this panel be on your guys' Facebook?
Yeah, it'll be recorded. It'll be on YouTube first, so look for us on YouTube.
Google.
I'll repeat that. Look for us on YouTube. And what's the YouTube account?
Electronic Frontiers Forums at DragonCon.
Electronic Frontiers Forums at DragonCon.
Thank you.
All right, so I use my Garmin for traveling simply because of the
You're good.
2 cups of coffee.
I'm jealous. I've had none.
But people that travel with me use their maps, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to want me messing with their phone. So other than becoming a hermit and keeping my phone in a potato chip bag, is there anything simple I can do or suggest to them for, not getting tracked?
Turning their location information off and completely hurt. I mean, like there are like hardware things like parity bags, for instance, that you can throw a phone into.
So keep one of those and say, okay, everybody's riding with me, put your phone in the bag.
Depending on your traveling with them and their willingness to kind of, not be tracked themselves. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we are humans. We live in a society, and it's hard to kind of make sure that you're not tracked when all of your buddies are being tracked, right?
Yeah, and especially if they know that I'm buddies with them.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, I mean, if I can interject, sorry. We often say privacy is a team sport, and part of that is, by virtue of your being here, that tells me that these are issues you think about and that you can explain to your friends a little bit, right? And kind of say like, look, I know it's kind of annoying, but like, this is why I feel this way. I think the thing that Bill said about sort of downloading sections of maps to your device, but when you're traveling, that can be a way to sort of limit the risk there. And then, you're the best advocate for your friends to talk about why these issues matter to you.
yeah, oddly enough, when I'm traveling, I really don't worry too much about it because I feel I'm fairly unimportant, but at the same time.
I hear you.
Well, but also what we control on our phones doesn't have anything to do with, what the security cameras are picking up. And I know just from looking out my hotel room window yesterday, there were some people who had drones 35 stories up last night. I saw them from my window. I don't know if they were government. I don't know if they were police. I don't know if they were just hobbyists. But we're not going to see them. But we know that they're around, and I don't think that there is a realistic way to be in an urban environment and be off the grid these days. Everything is interconnecting. And it's the choices that you make. Like I've made a choice to probably ridiculously continue playing Pokemon Go, even though I know what they're using it for, because it's, spinning the Pokestops is my Zen thing. And I've made that decision, but I made it with the knowledge of the decision.
To add to that too, there are choices that you can make in your own domain, in your own home, for instance, that are more privacy protective. Any smart device that you install, look up the privacy policy for them. And you're not a lawyer. If you're not a lawyer, then look up what others have written about them. There's a great utility that has sadly been discontinued recently, but it's Mozilla's Privacy Not Included, and it has a number of products that you can look up and see what their general privacy qualities are. One thing that I recommend in a smart home context is to install smart devices that are controlled through Zigbee or Z-Wave, these are technologies that you can turn devices on or off via a controller or a hub. And you can, via that hub, and there are a number of open source hub software available, like a Home Assistant has Z-Wave controls, and basically it's not like every single device, every single light bulb has a Wi-Fi card that is sending out your location information or any personal information or the when you have the light bulb on or off. So you're able to control the information that's sent out via those smart home hubs.
Oh, hi. So, for sites like Optory, I don't know if that's how you say it. So right now my data is, there's a lot of misinformation about me on the internet, for better or worse. So if I choose to do a site like Optory and tell them which one's correct and which one's not correct, is that better or is that worse?
But
The question is, do you want to flood the zone with so much that nobody knows what's real and what isn't?
No, my question is slightly different. My question is, by confirming what is the actual correct data, is that making me more at risk? That's actually
So I think that there is a secondary question there, and that is where are you interrogating the risk from? Because Bill and I have been talking about slightly different things. Like, he's been talking a lot about different ways that you can technologically, manifest different kinds of privacy stuff. And I've been focusing a little bit on different ways that you can control what information you're putting out there and what you're taking down. And if it's more important to you to limit your online footprint, to the past and going forward, then you might want to do something other than something very different from what somebody who wants to just have so much out there that the advertisers and the marketers and people they interact with don't know what's real and what isn't, so that it's not as valuable to those companies. Those are two very different reasons to want to control the information that's out there. And they don't have the same structure for how to manifest that.
I think.
Yeah, and the Optory, I think it depends also on how much you trust those services themselves, right? I think that largely the business model of these services is maintained by the fact that they're not selling that information, that they're not, and if they were to find out, their business would dive.
And also class action lawsuits and major breach of contracts.
Right, yeah. So actually would be a violation, possibly violation of the law. Exactly. So yeah, I think that by signing up for these services, you are not putting yourself at extra risk, or if you are, say, there's a data breach, for instance, at one of these companies, which happens, even if it's not intentional and they're releasing or selling that information, then the fact that they've removed it from so much of the internet otherwise would make it so that the cost benefit analysis works in your favor.
I'll be quick. I'm very curious about something I've read about called the illusion of security. Google Chrome and their incognito one being the perfect example, but I also kind of feel like Google in itself offers that as a whole. It's like, okay, you can turn off this one thing we provide, but we're still going to track you on everything else. Like, okay, turn off location on the photos you're uploading. We're still tracking your location on maps, or vice versa. So I'm just wondering how do you handle companies that are kind of circumventing the system by offering the illusion of security instead of just providing the security that you need? Basically, I'm asking you to solve the security problem.
I got this.
Paragraph or less.
So your work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that security and privacy aren't a binary. The fact that you are removing, say you're randomizing your mobile ad identifier, then they will be able to track you for small slivers of your journey, for instance. Anytime that you are, you're traveling, I mean, if you remove your mobile ad identifier altogether, then you are not tracked in this way, but you might be tracked in other ways, as you mentioned, right? But the more holistic of a picture that they have about you, the more they're able to, you basically want to break the links, break the continuity, break the chain of your whole picture, your whole location. Because that, I mean, location as an example, but that makes it harder for them to via queries that they might issue, kind of tell a story about you without your consent.
Okay, couple quick paranoid questions. All right, I have Google on my, I actually have Google 5, so don't hate me. But I have DuckDuckGo, and I use that when I have to, ask weird questions because I do a lot of writing, like how is the best way to kill 500 people at a time? Blah 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 blah. Is Google like? Is it safe to assume Google isn't somehow tracking what I'm doing because I have a Google phone and everything, but I'm using an app on their phone? Like DuckDuckGo, are they kind of secretly tracking that at all?
I think that they are not. So I think so. And then there's the separate question that is, for instance, I get this sometimes, is Facebook listening to me, right? And I think that the inferences that they can make for most people, if you don't take mitigating steps, are far worse than actually listening to you. Or actually just screenshotting you. I mean, with a caveat of there is this new Microsoft time machine thing, the Microsoft, I forget what the product's called again, but
Before you
time
said
capsule or something.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah. Sorry.
Recall.
Recall.
Thank you.
So that does actively just take screenshots and have a whole history information about your usage of Windows. So there are instances of just super egregious screen caps being sent about one, like a bunch. But in general, when you're using these services, the inferences that they can make about you are far more revealing than actually just taking screenshots, which is maybe more unnerving of an answer than the fact that they're screenshotting everything.
So we think no, but
But also the fact that the universe, the internet knows that you're a writer, knows that you're, doing all these things. Mitigates the potential for law enforcement to take action about what your search results are turning out to be. So having, an online persona, an online, account that talks about, I'm searching this today for this particular project mitigates the issue. Like, for example, I have a whole bunch of cannabis clients. My firm knows that I need to be able to search for things that should be blocked by for everybody else's system because they involve drugs and drug paraphernalia. Every 4 or 5 days, I have to go back to IT and say, remember, I'm supposed to have access to this, unblock it again. And they haven't been able to manifest it in a way that I'm perpetually able to access this. But I don't have a concern, for law enforcement to find out, why I'm, Googling, these specific, individual brands, because I have a reason for doing so. And that's part of what exists about me in whatever the databases about me are. So I have let myself become less paranoid and more comfortable with that, just because it's not something that I'm doing for nefarious purposes. And if you can explain while you're doing this, why you're doing this, you're creating an alibi in a paper trail.
Okay, so blah 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 for novel. Okay.
Or 5e.
Yeah.
I look forward to your novel about mass murder. Last question. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm kind of a tech idiot, but I'm getting better. And I'm trying to be more privacy conscious. So I've been using websites like TOSDR, Terms of Service Didn't Read. And I know it's basically volunteers that are compiling these lists of pretty much dumbing down the terms of service that for various companies. And then have I been, I don't know how to say it, pwned, whatever. Are those resources as helpful as I think they are? Because I don't have the tech nerd to help me.
Yeah, they are. They're very helpful resources to use to understand what the limitations of a privacy policy or the most egregious part of a privacy policy might be. Particularly, I know about How to Be Pwned is maintained by Troy Hunt. He is very good at making sure that data breaches are inputted into his tool, and to look up based on your email address or based on other information about you, what is out there. So these tools are, I mean, I know particularly is a really great one.
Okay, and is the Dragon Con app's privacy policy really as bad as I think it is? That looked atrocious from,
Yeah.
okay.
And sorry, we are gonna have to wrap up. Heidi,
I get one more.
I'm just gonna throw one thing in there. Thank you for ignoring so many words that I've written over the years. Everybody else has, so it's absolutely fine. So one of the things about terms of use policies, especially about smaller entities, smaller than DragonCon, is that they steal terms of use policies and privacy policies. So a company may have uploaded a terms of use policy to their website, never read it, possibly not removed the, New York Times or Yahoo email addresses from within it. I do searches every so often to find out where people are still using things I wrote 30 years ago, and they are, which is terrifying. So just because a site has a terms of use policy doesn't mean they've ever read it themselves or that they're abiding by it. But for anything that's publicly traded, or a company that does 500 million a year or more, you really should hope that they have. But most
For the first few years of Twitter's operation, they still had Flickr, which they adopted from it, listed in the role privacy policy.
All right, well,
Thank
that bombshell